This story deals with the arc of two lives that initially diverged, then came together almost inexplicably decades later. It's the summer of 1942, and we're on the beautiful beach at Wilderness along the Indian Ocean coast of South Africa. 15-year-old Heather Warren and her cousin are soaking up the sun when they spot a large black inner tube from a tractor tire floating way out beyond the breakers. Now, tractor tubes make for great fun on a river. I did it myself as a kid. You sit in them and you get towed behind a motorboat. It's rather like a slower version of water skiing. It's great fun. Both cousins are champion swimmers, so they decide to swim out and fetch the tube. Only when they get close to it, they realize it's not a tube at all. It's a woman in a black swimming costume, bobbing and rolling in the swell. She appears to be dead, her arms outstretched in the water, lifeless and weightless. And clinging to her neck is a terrified little girl. That little girl was 5-year-old Elaine Hurry, and I met her when she was in her 80s, living with her little dog Molly in Johannesburg. She was petite and moved quickly. Elaine, that is, not Molly, who's a little black barrel. We drank tea, Molly snored, and Elaine told me about that unforgettable day in 1942. Like the Warren teenagers, she too had been soaking up the sun further down Wilderness Beach.
We were with the Watson family, and I had 2 elder cousins, and they set out to go and swim. And I ran after them, and they were unaware, and I got caught in a suddenly there are these holes near the rocks. And I fell into the hole and got swept out by a riptide.
On the rocks was a fisherman who watched helpless as the screaming child was dragged out into deep water.
And I never forget, he just shrugged. I mean, but what could he do?
Back on the beach, that awful, awful realization dawned on Elaine's mother, Gwen, that her daughter had disappeared.
You know how mother is. She kind of looked round and thought, where's the child? Now, she couldn't swim. But I suppose if you see your child being carried out and drowning, you will go. And so she came, and then I think I was terrified, and I think I was so frightened when she came, I clung round her neck. She was the one that was very close to death.
The 2 Warren cousins tried desperately to get mother and child to shore, but even as experienced lifesavers, they found it far from easy. Gwen felt like a dead weight, and in her blind panic, little Elaine was making things very tough as well.
I vaguely remember them trying to pull me off my mother. Oh, and then I do remember I transferred my clinging onto Heather.
The little limpet.
I think I vaguely remember her saying, "Don't hold me there, I can't swim."
Well, Elaine survived her near drowning, clearly, and so did her mother, although Gwen had to be hospitalized for a few days. When she recovered, she presented each of the Warren cousins with a gold watch to thank them for their heroic efforts. On the back of each was engraved, "I owe you my life. Thank you, Gwen Hurry." Now, a near-death experience sometimes prompts a profound change in direction. Perhaps it did for Gwen.
Do you remember her ever remarking on how wonderful it was to have a second lease on life? Because she would have been more aware of it.
Well, I came out literally about 5 years ago. I myself only discovered this, that she told her very, very close friend that when she thought she wasn't going to make it, she said, "And I realise I've messed up my life. I've married the wrong man." And then when she found she had survived and came out of hospital, and we returned from holiday, I think to my poor father's unutterable shock and dismay, she said, "I want to divorce and marry Fitz." The man she actually had fallen in love with at university, and then they'd gone their separate ways.
And who was Fitz?
Fitz was Dr. Vivian Fitzsimons, who she did marry. A most amazing, lovely stepfather to me.
Were you aware of the quality of their relationship, your mum and Fitz?
I was aware then, and thinking back on it, I've never, ever known two people so in love and so happy together.
Gwen only lived to her mid-60s, so just as well she got on with the business of being happy for the remaining 30 years of her life. Elaine, too, was happily married for many years, and when she was eventually widowed, she moved into Silvermine Retirement Village in the Cape. She was in reception one day reading a newspaper article about her nephew, Ken Oosterbroek. Ken was a talented and well-known South African news photographer who was shot in controversial circumstances in a township just prior to our first democratic elections. Another Silvermine resident was reading the paper over Elaine's shoulder.
So I said, piping up, I said, yes, well, of course it was murder. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a stray bullet at all. And she said, Ken Oosterbroek, I have a gold watch, and on the back it says, I owe you my life. Thank you, Gwen Oosterbroek. Would that be a relation? I said, that's my mother. And she looked at me. She said, you're the little girl I pulled out the sea.
It was Heather Warren, over 70 years since the near drowning. Now, some would regard that encounter as a miracle, others as the result of a sequence of coincidences, maybe. The teenagers happened to be on that part of the very long wilderness beach. They happened to see and want the black in a tube, and they happened to be very strong swimmers, so they managed to get Gwen and Elaine back to shore. I asked Elaine whether she thought she'd been lucky on that day, or fated, or blessed.
You can believe in this and you can believe in that. I have to kind of believe your time of coming in maybe, but your time of going and leaving is preordained. If it's not your time to go, I don't think.
Does that give you peace? Now, I mean, you're an old lady. You're an elderly lady. Sorry, not old.
I'm old. Why put a fine point on it?
Okay. You're an old lady now. Does that give you peace, knowing that when the day comes, it comes, and there's not a lot you can do about that?
It has latterly made me humble. And it's made me read more sensibly.
Yep, you know what they say about life being too short to drink bad wine and read bad books. And just to finish off our story, Elaine saw the precious gold watch once, but it eventually disappeared from Heather's cottage. Heather Warren became Heather Maltby, and she was a prolific and very good painter. She kept working till her death at the age of 89, even though her eyesight faded. Elaine's son Simon bought one of her paintings, and it hangs in his home in America. On the back he's written, I owe my life to the painter of this work, as do my children and all those who come after them. Heather kept up her swimming and was utterly fearless in the water right till the end. The next 3 generations of her female offspring became, wouldn't you know it, lifesavers. Amazing. I have no doubt you'll send in more stories of synchronicity or coincidence or just plain luck to Storycatcher because we love them. Well, I hope you do. I do. We're always searching for meaning and patterns in this random and ruthless universe of ours. Patterns that help us see our lives as somehow significant, not as cosmic accidents. I went to see Elaine about 18 months after we'd recorded her interview to play her the finished product, which you've just heard. Not only did I want to get her consent for what we'd produced, but because there was a chance that she wouldn't be around when Storycatcher launched. Elaine had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and was living on borrowed time. Molly was gone. She died at the ripe old age of 18 or 19. We sat in Elaine's sunroom drinking tea, just like before. You remember what Elaine said about her proximity to death having the effect of making her read more sensibly. Well, now that that proximity was even closer, I was particularly interested in knowing what she was reading. Her bedside table was still full of books. Light fiction to put her to sleep, she said. A book about Helen of Troy. Proof of Heaven, an account of the afterlife apparently experienced by a medical doctor in the States. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So a combination of sensible but inquisitive reading matter. The remarkable Elaine Hurry died 6 days ago at the age of 87. Go well, Elaine, go well.